Hello! I figured I'd make this video to kind of help support new tank players in Overwatch 2. If you don't have time to watch a 10-minute video, totally get it. So I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of the 5 tips I think will help you become a better tank. The first tip I want to make sure that you all know about is that as a tank, you're creating as much space as possible. This just means that you're utilizing the abilities of your tank, even their ult, to create that space for your DPS to get into the back line and kill the enemy team's healers or at least kill off their DPS. My second piece of advice is that you should prioritize the natural cover of the map. This includes the payload, right? As a tank, your whole job is to tank damage, right? And one way to mitigate the damage that you receive is by playing the natural cover. My third point is that you want to protect your healers and your DPS teammates for as long as possible. This means that you should be dying last. The healers are the ones who keep you alive, keeps the team alive. The DPS heroes are the ones who need to be getting the eliminations. Now it's great if you get eliminations too, that's awesome. The DPS heroes are the ones who are getting the eliminations for you to push the payload. My fourth point is that you want to make sure you're always in the line of sight of your healers. If your healers can't see you, then you can't get healed. This means that you'll want to avoid getting into those small rooms, right? Those are death traps for healers, or pushing too far past the payload. And the last point is don't be afraid to switch to a tank that works, right? Sometimes the tank that you have doesn't work with your team's composition, so switching to a tank that works with your team's composition, or at least counters the enemy team's tank, is a good way to go from barely winning a game to just dominating. So those are the 5 tips I have for you. If you want to stick around, I'll show some gameplay from my stream. I stream almost every day at twitch.tv/KnowledgeJ. This gameplay utilizes pretty much all these tips and tricks that we talked about so far. And if you have any tips and tricks of your own, please let us know. Feel free to share it with the community. So as we're starting around, you want to make sure you know where your teammates are at, because those are the people who you'll be protecting. And as soon as this goes down, you'll want to start looking for the natural cover. So we have the payload in front of us. Here we have this corner. This corner is really important because it can block side damage, but it can also mitigate damage to our shield. So we want to play those corners. Now, even though we are creating space, we want to remember that we can't push too far out from the payload. The whole point of being a tank is to take damage for your teammates. So as we're pushing through the first choke, I noticed that most of my teammates are on the payload and there's no enemy team contesting the point. And this is really important as a tank because here you see my shield is going down, and the whole point of being a tank is to create space, so I try to do that, and it doesn't go too well, but that's okay. So just put your shield back up towards the payload and get those heals.
Oh no, I let my barrier
Now
down.
unfortunately I let my shield go down a bit too quick, so I had to reset. When you're resetting as a tank, all you're doing is utilizing your tank abilities. Here, I'm using Reinhardt's shield. Unfortunately, it goes down a bit too quick, so I try to rush in to create space so my DPS can get backline and start doing work. And this is when I begin to notice that I'm not getting as many heals as I need to survive as a tank. And you'll notice that the heals on my team are less than the damage output of the enemy team, so I need to adjust. I switched to Sigma because Sigma is a good flex tank, meaning that even though he has a shield, he's still able to do range damage.
Dude.
Another important aspect of being a tank is to know where your teammates are at all times. I noticed my team got wiped here, so that calls for a reset. And a reset on a payload map is simply going through the first choke again. So you see I play the corner, use my shield around the corner. The enemy team is giving me space, so it allows me to push up, allows my DPS to start going in, we start getting some picks, creating space, allowing my DPS to do some work, trying to capitalize on any picks that I can get. One thing you'll notice here is that the payload got pushed back into the choke. So once again, we have to make sure that we are trying to create enough space for our DPS to get in the backline, kill their DPS, and hopefully kill their healers. For whatever reason, right here I lose my ult. I'm not sure what happened. I didn't activate it, but
How did
it just kind of
how did my
disappeared.
ult just disappear?
As you'll notice, we have a Tracer, a Kiriko, and a Moira. And what this means is that maybe Sigma isn't the best choice with our DPS and our healers. One important thing to remember as a tank is that line of sight is super important. If your healers don't have line of sight on you, then they can't heal you, right? So I picked Orisa as a way for my healers to have a more manageable target. And there's nothing wrong with switching tanks. I noticed a lot of people don't like switching tanks, but switching to a tank that works with the composition of your team is one of the most important things you can do as a tank player. The next tip is, as a tank, payload is pretty much the most solid defense in the whole game. Working yourself around the payload allows you to mitigate damage to yourself, but continue to put pressure on the enemy team. So even though I died, my teammates still were able to maintain their position on the point. So as I come back, I start to focus their healers, as this is a good way to get the final push to the payload. However, you don't want to stray away too far from the payload itself. The whole point of payload is to push it to the objective. So if you're a tank and you stray too far from the payload, it can leave your teammates open to getting killed. So once you get past the first checkpoint, the next step is to try to create space going towards the next checkpoint. So I'm playing this wall right here because I know it's a good natural cover. I can show presence to the enemy team. Now the enemy team didn't put pressure on us, so all of this is just going to be free real estate to get to the next choke. So as the payload approaches the next choke, a good way to create space is to use your ult. Now it helps if your ult is something like D.Va's and it can blow up and kill enemies. Even Orisa's ult that does kind of a widespread damage allows for your teammates to push up through the choke itself. You'll notice, again, I'm playing these corners. These corners are super important. They allow me to output damage and hopefully get a pick. I was able to pick off their Orisa. Now I'm focusing on their healers and on their DPS. Once you take down their DPS and then take down their healers, the checkpoint should pretty much just be open for you to take and to cap the fight. So one thing to always remember as a tank is to see where the payload is at. I noticed that an enemy team was still on there, so I'm not pushing forward until they are completely clear.
Oh, that's funny. Tank diff. Oh, I didn't know I did that.
I get a endorsement receipt. So as we push the payload through the last choke, I want to stay with it. I notice the enemy team is on the top left, so they're not contesting the payload at all. So there's no reason for me to stray too far from it. Here, I'm just trying to do as much damage as I can. I'm trying to use the payload itself to block damage from the flank and from in front of me so that we can get to the last push in order to win the game. So even though I died as Orisa, I begin to notice that the output damage and the input heals is more than the input heals for the enemy team. So this is a good sign that the tank you picked is actually working. So once again, we have to reset, and I play this corner just like every other corner in the map to try to get as much cover and try to create more space for my DPS.
Oh, we just threw that way overhead.
So once again, team got wiped, so now we have to reset. And you'll see that I'm looking to see if there's any stray enemy team. I'm trying to play this corner here to the left, but I noticed once again the enemy team's not even close to the payload. So now I'm just going to push up and create as much space as I can, allow my DPS to start doing some work, taking as much damage for your team as you can. Because the most important thing to get to the last choke as a tank is to allow your DPS to live, because they'll do the most damage.
Oh, that ad break though, dude. Yeah, you're on.
So
playing
these are
this
the
right
5 tips I can give you, right? You want to create space for your team to push up, especially for your DPS to get into the back lines. You want to make sure to use the natural cover of the map and the payload to protect yourself from damage. Make sure you stay in the line of sight of your healers so that they can heal you. Protect your healers and your DPS for as long as possible. And finally, pick a tank that works with your team's composition, or just at least make sure you pick a tank that counters the enemy team's tank themselves.
I got 4. Hell yeah. Endorsement King.